Then the third component that Sternberg found in all relationships is that they were looking for commitment. This component concerns the willpower and the character of the individual to decide and commit oneself to another in an unselfish way. Now, this is the most rational, just kind of like the passion is more the emotional, and the commitment is more about rational decision-making, and it's about one's self-discipline to follow through on one's commitments. It's a decision, first of all, one makes to love the other. First of all, you have to make that decision. I'm going to commit myself to this relationship. This requires a rational decision that one chooses to care for the beloved. It's an ongoing decision to do what one must to maintain the relationship by faithfulness to the relationship. That kind of commitment. And again, what's the bottom line on this one? There are many people that are totally committed to their partner and they cheat on their partner. Why? Because their character is weak. So how much would you rely on the fact if I told you, listen, I'll give you a check for $1 million right now. Right, I'll write you out a check for $1 million. Now, if you believed me about that particular subject, you would be deluded. And even if I wrote you out a check, believe me, it would never be, it's my bank, maybe my check. But if you think you're going to get $1,000, all I'm going to do is get a $20 charge for overcharge. But you would be deluded to think that. And if I was the type of person who went around and talked like that and gave away checks like that, I would be a person of poor character, to say the least. But the good news is, you can develop your character. You can become a more responsible person. Usually this occurs in one's spiritual life, as one learns to be wiser and more disciplined, learns the value of commitment and faithfulness, and develops a kind of character that can be faithful. Because the bottom line on the commitment thing is it's not easy to be committed when some of the other elements are not going very well. And there'll always be times that that's true. There are going to be times when, the intimacy that you've maybe built up, you're not really expressing it and things are not going very well. You're out of sync with one another. And when there is no passion in a long-term relationship, all you have left is commitment. And if either one of the parties has weak character, you can see how that could be lost. And so commitment's a vital part of having a long-term sustained relationship. But when you take all three of these, we're going to look at them as idealized triangles where each side is equal. But if you think about it, if you were to draw an actual triangle of these three things, it would change in relationships. The passion thing would expand and then it would narrow. Be a little bit and then it'd be a lot, and then it'd be a moderate amount. Intimacy thing might grow. That side of the triangle might grow. The commitment side might stay the same. You see what I'm saying? So the triangle might change shapes, but it would still be a triangle. But let's look a little bit further. I also have on your handout. The next one is an example of when you start putting these possible things together. What do you have? And the first one is what I refer, and these are all Sternberg's research. The first is called non-love. That's where there's, the little X's, and you have a triangle, there's nothing on either side, any of them. The absence of all three components, this describes a large majority of our personal relationships, which are simply casual interaction. In other words, it's not that one can't say, well, one has some concern for his fellow man, but if you're just casually interacting with people, you really don't have an opportunity to develop intimacy or for there to be an opportunity of decision for commitment. Oftentimes, certainly not an opportunity, or one doesn't feel a sense of passion towards the casual relationship one has. So most of our relationships in reality really don't have any of these three. But what about if you just have intimacy? Sternberg calls that, an extract, liking. So, I like somebody. what do you mean about like somebody? Well, you can talk to the person, tell them about your life. And if that's all there is to it, that's what we mean by liking. Liking includes such things as closeness and warmth, but not the intense feelings of passion or commitment. So, hopefully you have, friendships where you like people, where you develop various levels of depth of friendship. Now, that's a component of what we ideally want and we need in a couple relationship. But some people, and with most people we have a relationship with, is simply a matter of intimacy. And then we talk about infatuation, the next diagram. That's where you have passion, but everything else is business. So if it's just passion, then I think we're wise to call that infatuation. What do we mean by infatuation? It means something that's going to go away. But see, that's inherent in passion. Passion itself comes and goes, comes and goes. It's not something that just comes and stays. But if that's all there is, then it comes and it leaves. And an episode of passion can last for months, perhaps maybe a year. An episode, especially if you are separated from this person to some degree and off and on to see them, you can have a long-term kind of episodic passion with nothing else being there. But at some point, it always dies away. And it's not, the more intimacy you get, then the passion will go away because now you know them, not idealize them. The next graph, romantic love. That's where you have intimacy and passion. This is the Romeo and Juliet type of love. The Shakespearean Romeo and Juliet is a combination of intimacy and passion. More than infatuation. It's liking with the added excitement of physical attraction and arousal, but without commitment. So, some people have romantic love. That's it. But they themselves have no intention, or have made, maybe one party, and here's where, of course, the problems ensue, expectation. Maybe one party makes a decision, oh, well, I'm going to be faithful and committed to you, and the other party says, I'm just out fishing in the sea. And, well, I like you. I'm attracted to you. But I'm not interested in making a commitment to anyone. And so one has to be careful, because sometimes when people experience romantic love, they assume, well, this must mean it's the real thing. Therefore, you feel the same way. Therefore, you will decide like me that this is a unique one person for life experience, and therefore I commit myself to this relationship. But the other party may not. So this could be dangerous. But then Hollywood love, the next one. Sternberg called it Hollywood love. I like that. It's where you have commitment and passion. So basically, boy meets girl, a week later they're engaged, a month later they're married. They're committed on the basis of their passion. But because intimacy takes time to develop, they don't have the emotional core necessary to sustain the commitment. This kind of love, Sternberg warns, usually doesn't work out. You just see, it's like one day you wake up in a relationship and you think, who is this person? And as you discover the more, you think, I don't even like you. Why are we in this relationship? What happened? Well, again, it's a person being in love with love, caught up in an episode of passion to which one commits to the other without having attained or worked out or developed any real intimacy. And then the last one is when you have all three sides of the triangle. Well, perfect companion. Let's look at that. That's where you have commitment and intimacy. Companionate love is intimacy with commitment, but no passion. It's a long-term friendship. The kind of committed love and intimacy frequently seen in marriages in which the physical attraction has died down, and which is normal to expect there'll be periods of that in any long-term relationship. That's just the reality, because like we said, passion is something you have to constantly renew. It's not something that just automatically stays at full intensity. Just doesn't, can't, won't. But can constantly be renewed. But in a good relationship, a couple would hopefully have commitment and intimacy. That's a companion in love. And so even when passion is not a driving force, it's not the end of the relationship. And then let's look at the last two. Empty love. This is kind of the sad one. Where you have commitment without intimacy or passion. The kind of love seen perhaps in a marriage of 30 years has become stagnant. You know, maybe we've known, I don't know, maybe your parents, somebody else's parents that you've known, older couple, been married a long time. You know, they don't plan to separate. But you can tell the way they interact, they're not friends. They don't get along. They don't really like each other. And they obviously feel no passion. They don't want the other person to touch them or have anything to do with them or them the other. But they're committed that, you know, I should stay in this relationship. You know, we've been in it thus long, and, you know. But that's kind of a sad thing when you really look at it. It's certainly not at all what we need to expect. It certainly doesn't have to end that way. Matter of fact, research indicates that actually the passion part, especially the sexual relationship, gets better in longer-term relationships. In other words, the passion, when lived out in a committed relationship, gets better 20 years down the road than it was to begin with. And 30 years, it could be even better. So it can grow in being good because of the intimacy you also share. But if you lose the intimacy, and all you have is a commitment, you have a kind of stagnant relationship, which is a sad, kind of a tragic thing that some people end up with because they didn't maintain their intimacy or their passion. And finally is what Sternberg calls consummate love, you know, the ultimate form of love. This is what we're all looking for. You know, that's what he can't, but culture to culture, place to place, this is what everybody wants. And the assumption is, because I want it, because that would be a good thing, then it ought to be easy to have. I mean, if you really want it, it ought to be easy. But here's what he found. The kind of love that many people strive towards, especially in romantic relationships, achieving consummate love, says Sternberg, is like trying to lose weight. Difficult but not impossible. The really hard thing is keeping the weight off after you've lost it. Not true. You lose weight, but then how do you keep it off? Or keeping consummate love alive after you've achieved it. See, it's not like if you achieve it, it's not like it's difficult to achieve, to even get to that point in a relationship. It takes time. You don't do that in 6 months. You don't do that in 1 year. You don't do that in 2 years. It takes time to develop consummate love. But the difficulty is, even if you attain it, it's difficult to maintain. You know, because people change. You know, the demands and the pressures on one or both of the individuals. You know, let's face it, children are a wonderful gift from God to a relationship. But the flip side of the coin is it takes the focus off of the couple and puts it onto the children. And so sometimes the relationship suffers. Just suffers. Because with all the added responsibility, by the time you have children and they get older and more demanding on your time and energy, etc. Well, by that time you are in a more responsible job than you've been before, and that's also taking a great deal of time. Both people have very responsible jobs. They have other responsibilities in the community. Where's the time for their relationship? And couples who have good relationships sometimes make the mistake of saying, well, we've got a great relationship. Now we don't have to do anything. We'll just coast. But what tends to happen, of course, if you don't take time, if you don't prioritize time for your relationship with one another, some of those will diminish. Your intimacy may be latently better, but you're not expressing and experiencing it. The passion will go away. And if you're not careful, you know, you may become more committed to other things out here than you are to your relationship. So all these things. One person that was committed at one time may just choose to not be committed. So you have to constantly work on your character. You have to work on your relationship and communication, connection, and have to work on renewing romantic love if you hope to have an ongoing, healthy relationship.